fostered the territory that you're on. So this is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. I also acknowledge that Toronto was covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Now, with everything that has been going on in the past month, I would just like to really take a moment for all of us, just for 1 second, to send out a bit of love into the universe and just think pleasant thoughts so that we can start this on a really positive note. So let's just take a sec. So deep breath in, deep breath out. Thank you for taking that time. So now I saw this done in another Zoom presentation, and I loved it so much. So what I want everyone to do for 1 second is think about who inspires them and who inspires you. What inspires you? And just take that minute, and in the comments box on the chat, I want you, on the count of 3, to type in what's inspiring, like what's your inspiration, and just share it with everyone. So then that way we can all kind of hear about where everyone else is going and maybe get inspired to look at something new from the group. Okay, are we all up for it?
Wow.
Okay, so ready? 1, 2, 3, go. Oh, nice. Nature and Animals, George Weber. Oh, George is awesome. Albert Einstein, nice. Nature, love it. Nice. Okay, well, thank you everybody for sharing, and keep sharing. Don't hold back, because I want to see where people go with this. So now the reason that we are here tonight is that we're going to talk about inspiration, how to get it, where to get it from, and how to maintain it. So a short history of myself. You can see my name, Paulette Michayluk. I'm originally from Alberta, traveled a lot, lived a lot of different places, and for a little over 10 years now, I've made Toronto my home. And for pretty much my whole life, I have been taken by photography in some way, shape, or form, but always thought in images, not in words. So after a very short stint in social work, I decided to go back to school and went to the Alberta College of Art and Design in Calgary, which is now called ACAD-U. And there, when I entered, a huge change was going on, and darkrooms were being ripped out, which I didn't know. And so essentially I went from being a photo major to being a textile major, because that was the one place where I could learn about printing stuff the best. We also had a printing department, so I did a double major. And I really feel like that gave me a unique advantage, because it was a different way of thinking about photography and also thinking about presenting work. So blah, 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 long story short, I didn't know how to make negatives. And so that was the biggest thing, was that I knew how to take a photo and I knew how to develop film, but I didn't know how to take a digital negative. I didn't know how to make a digital negative. So my work at the start was really, really primitive, but we get better. So when I got to Toronto, I started to work with Bob Carney, and anyone who knows Silver Shack and now the Bob Carney printmaking, and really developed quickly from there, and have been just overjoyed that he's been both a friend and a mentor to me for a really long time. So yeah, so now I started Defend the Darkroom. I was sitting and wondering, like, it was at a very crazy time for me, and I was wondering how I was doing things, why I was doing things, how other people were keeping doing things and not seeming like they were faltering. And I thought, hey, I want to start talking to them. And so I did. And that was the beginning of Defend the Darkroom. So another quick question for everyone to kind of share answers with. Do you look at other people's work to get inspired? Yes or no? 1, 2, 3. Excellent. I'm glad that a lot of people are saying yes. Because I hear some people go, oh, I never look at other people's work because I don't want to get influenced or something. Well, personally, I love being influenced. I looked, because a very good friend of mine always starts her research with looking up things in the OED. I thought that's how I would start things. So inspiration is defined as the process of being mentally stimulated to do or feel something, especially to do something creative, a sudden, brilliant, or timely idea. Now, influence is the capacity to have an effect on the character development or behavior of someone or something, or the effect itself, which I thought was really interesting because it's kind of almost one and the same. Now, plagiarism is something completely different. Don't do it. Never a good thing. But to kind of talk about inspiration, my first inspiration came from a woman by the name, an Ontario woman by the name, which is Penelope Stewart. Now, I am wanting to share my screen, but I am unable to. Someone else is already sharing their screen. So is Chelio, would you be able to help me out on that?
Yep, please try now.
There we go. Thank you. Okay, so this is Penelope Stewart's work. Let me do this so it's a little bit better to look at. So this is Penelope Stewart's work. Now, it doesn't look so big here. If you know anything about floorboards, that gives you a bit of scale. But this piece of work is gigantic, and it is printed on silk organza. It is done with Van Dyke printing, which is a one of the first silver-based printing techniques. And so essentially she did this, and this was at a point in time when I was in textiles and everyone was like, film photography's dead. Silver photography's dead. Hand printing is gone. And I was like, no, like this isn't even 20 years ago. So we were full on to the digital revolution. And I was like, no, there's got to be something. And up comes Penelope Stewart in my second year as a visiting artist. And this work absolutely made me jump up and down, because I'm finally seeing someone who is doing something in the scale and the way that I wanted to do it. And so that got my juices flowing. So this is another one. It's not as great a photo as the first one, but it also is quite large. So these are almost 10 feet wide and about 10 feet tall. So really beautiful work. And Penelope is just an amazing photographer as well as printmaker. She actually was one of the people who started the Open Studio in Toronto. So just incredible. And so this also made me realize that she also showed me that being out in the world and just seeing was something that was really so very important. And so I began to realize that in order to be a good photographer, I had to practice and I had to have a practice. So I'm wondering, like, do you all, like, I'm hoping that all of you have a practice. And yeah, so sorry, lost my train of thought. Oh no. Here we go. And so, and it took me a really long time to figure out what practice meant. So in coming to Toronto and getting to know people in the photographic community, and then also getting into Defend the Darkroom, I got to start talking to people like a gentleman by the name of Marcel Petit, who is a First Nations photographer and videographer in Saskatoon, and Ruth Kaplan. Now, both of these people are really interesting in that Marcel is a guy who puts his camera down before he starts shooting, and he really walks around the site. He's best known for a body of work that he did in Cambodia with the poor villages in Cambodia. And being that he works in First Nations residences, he put his camera down before really starting to dig into what he was shooting, which I thought was really interesting, because instead of just assuming he understood, he decided that, no, I don't understand. Ruth is just an incredible observer. Everyone knows, at least from Ryerson and Seneca and Humbert, lots of people know Ruth for her skill in the darkroom, but I love her skill for being able to see and being able to be quiet and just like taking in to a point of view. So what I really am trying to encourage people to think about is don't stop questioning. You have to keep trying something a little bit different and a little bit more. And by putting your camera down and by walking around and looking at what you are actually doing, like Penelope here, she like looked at a column and saw something that made her question the structure and the formality of architecture, which I thought is really quite stunning. So yeah, one of the places that I lived in my past lives was Victoria, BC. And this is a very strange kind of little segue into our next artist that I'm going to talk about. But I loved eating at this one place as many times a week as I could muster, which was called John's Place. And I hate Eggs Benedict, but other than my grandmother's Eggs Benedict, I will eat Eggs Benedict at John's Place. Absolutely fabulous, great view, interesting little restaurant. People are probably looking at me right now going, do not care about Eggs Benedict. Why are you talking to me about Eggs Benedict? Trust me, stay with me. So, place is always comfortable, always had tons of stuff on the walls, tons of photos, tons of things to look at. I go to art school. I start researching different artists, especially historically relevant artists. And we come to Hannah Maynard. Now, Hannah is, I would say, there we go. Hannah, I would say, should be in a canon. She actually is not. And for those of you wondering what the canon is kind of like the body of work that we all go back to look at. And I love Hannah. She was one of my hugest inspirations. She started photographing in the 1860s, maybe even a little bit earlier, and was one of the premier business owners in Victoria, BC. Her business was actually run out of John's Place restaurant. She actually owned that building. Now, as you can see on the right, there is the Little Gems of British Columbia. Now, Hannah was the person that you wanted to get your photograph taken by, your portrait. And so parents across BC would bring their children to her to photograph. And as publicity material, she would take every single photograph of children and make a large scale poster out of them. So this was actually, I believe she printed these 1114. They might have even been as large as 16 by 20, but each one of them, she would cut out in the darkroom the negative, place them on, and then print them. Now, if you really get in there and look, you'll even see though that there are no lines, there are no gaps, there's nothing. It's perfect. Even with the photos of like Photoshop work today, it's hard to make something like this. She's doing this by hand and in camera, which personally, props, like such an amazing woman. But then she takes it one step further. So how do you get this idea to take it one step further? And then she takes the picture of the jug and puts these kids on the jug. Neat. Really goes to show you that as you push yourself and you really start to look at things, you start to question, you start to evolve. Well, the evolution goes further. So this is Hannah's a little bit later. These first are from like the 1870s. This is getting closer to the 1900s. The picture on your left is her husband, which I love this photo. Actually for two reasons. One, he's got a gun on his lapel. Like, wow, that's like, that kind of tells you what type of guy he is. But also, what I also really love is that she superimposed her face on his heart. Now, way to stake your claim on a man. It's like, I'm going to print you, and your Christmas card photo is going to have my face on your lapel. Really love it, because it really goes to show her progress. She's evolving. She's taking it one step further. Well, then she takes it even further. And this is this picture on the right is done at the end of her career. So the knowledge that she must have had to be able to do this in camera, in studio, is epic, and really inspired me that with all of the tools and skills that I had at my disposal, how can you not like go further with this? So one last photo of this is this one, which I really liked as well, just because of how perfect it is. You can't see the lines. There's no mirrors, there's no smoke, you can't see it. Like, she's a real deal. Sorry, I could go on. And the thing I like, and then you just find out, like really odd tidbits as you Wikipedia or whatnot. Her final job was to be the jailhouse photographer in 1907. Just like her. She's kind of cool. So yeah, so it really goes to show that as you get technical skill, as you really dig deep into knowing how you're doing something, sure, you can talk about the technical who's its and what's its of being able to do something, but it really doesn't, it only gives you the technical only gives you part of it. It really shows that you need those ideas, you need the meat of something. Okay, so I am going, now let's hope this actually works, and I can show this to you. Now, this is, I think, my most favorite inspirational moment, and I hope that you aren't appalled and find it as interesting as I do. Now, I'm just going to give you a short 30-second clip of this, only because it's 5 minutes long at this point. Can everyone hear it and see it? And yes, it is bumpy. It's not meant, it's not the music is very soft, and it is a very bumpy, weird image. Okay, so a lot of you are probably thinking that I'm like completely insane for having shown you this, but give me a sec. Let me explain. So the gentleman who created this movie is named Antonio Martinez. He is a professor in Illinois, and this is a project that he has been doing now for over 8 years. He's moved on to a couple other Instagram projects, but this was his baby for over 8 years. He took 16 rolls of 35mm film, went to the circus and shot a whole entire circus performance. He then came back to the darkroom wondering what he was going to do with this film, because he just thought circuses were kind of interesting, the role of men versus women, all of that, very interesting. But what actually happened was that he made 800 tintypes and then scanned those tintypes in and turned them into a 5-minute short movie. A lot of people are like, okay, well, the movie isn't really that good and the tintypes are kind of crap and don't really get it. Personally, I look at this and I think, wow, this is a guy who in 2004 had this idea that he wanted to merge every single type of technical photo ability into one and make something final with it. And I think this is inspirational alone. This is divine inspiration, because it's showing you that there's no reason to say, well, I only shoot 8x10 large format. What can you do with that 8x10 large format? Like, how far can you push it? Because this guy, he pushed it to the end, which I think is absolutely, it's not maybe the most, some people would say it's not the most beautiful thing, but it is thought-provoking, and it is strange. Very, very strange. So one of the things that I keep on coming back to is, why are you taking a photograph? Like, yes, you can use an 8x10 camera really well. Yes, you can use a digital camera really well. Yes, you can take pictures of raindrops and this, but why? What, like, where does that come from? What makes you go there? So I kind of don't stop at anything for inspiration. And so I was actually listening to the basketball player, Chris Bosh, the other day, talk about his new book. And I find Chris a rather, Mr. Bosh, excuse me, a rather interesting fellow, only because not only did he play basketball, but he also knows, he's also considered a master at AutoCAD, and he can code. So I find that really interesting. Like, here's a guy who at 6'7" is like essentially visually pigeonholed, but he actually has developed himself in so many other aspects. And when he was retired, he mentioned that he was really lost for quite a long while. And he said that he was really not knowing what he was doing. And so the quote that I said is, I didn't know what I was doing, but I was doing it. And he kept on mentioning that, how every single day he would get up and do one thing. And it just kind of was like, okay. And then the next day he did 2 things. And sometimes he would repeat those. Didn't know why, but it was like, he just kept on going on and on in hopes that something would come of it. And to me, that is the basis of every great photographic practice, is just keep doing it. Like 800 tintypes, why, like after about 25, I would be like, why the heck am I doing this again? But he kept doing them. And 800 of them, he was certain he was going to have something at the end. You might not know what you have at the start, but you'll have something at the end, even if it's a big pile of nothing. And who knows, that big pile of nothing, someone else might come along, look at it and go, hey, I know what I can do with that. Can I have it? And that's the fantastic world of not only being a photographer, but being creative. Because then the minute that you say you're a creative, you unharness yourself from staying stuck in that one pigeonhole. So I interviewed people like Diane Boss, who I'm not too sure if anyone knows her, but she's a pinhole photographer. And one of her projects actually was to go to Dawson City, and she had to do something. She didn't know what she got to do. She was part of a great exhibition, and she had to do something. And so the one thing everyone talked about, because it was during one of the days that had the midnight sun, she decided to show them what the starry sky should look like if they actually were to have twilight. And so she built a tent and poked holes in it to replicate the stars. Now, a lot of people are like, oh, big freaking deal. But that was really interesting because all of a sudden people were being able to understand the basis of, first off, photography, but also what the night sky looks like during the summer. Really cool. Deborah Samuel, when I talked to her on the podcast, she talked a lot about lanes, and she talked a lot about getting really super focused about one thing. But then all of a sudden you start veering off and you start noticing how you're moving to one side. And to me, that's really an attestament to that evolution, that when you're growing a practice, you need to be open to being interested in everything and not just one thing. So last but not least, this gentleman whose name, oops, there we go. So this gentleman is a videographer by the name of Jamie Livingston, and his practice is really unique. He's actually fairly well known. He actually also made a circus, so I seem to have a circus thing going on this evening. But he in the whole idea of practice and repetition and thoughtfulness, and sometimes doing a collection of what you don't know you're doing, and then all of a sudden have a big box of it. He took a Polaroid every single day. Now, he started taking Polaroids in 1979. This is one of the first Polaroids he actually took. He took Polaroid every day. And he passed away in 1997. So that's, I can't do math. So that's a lot of years, and that's a lot of Polaroids when you think 365 Polaroids every single day. Now, I'm certain at the start of it, it was just a lark, like, click, click, click. But then he became known as the guy who took Polaroids, one Polaroid every single day. And he was very deliberate about it. And to me, this is like a real testament to, first off, like really dedicating yourself to how you see and looking around, because it's in those little tiny moments that you may or may not see something that you never saw before. So you're doing something completely different, and it's committing to that difference and then just sticking with it and moving forward. So just it's a whole exploration of what's going on around you and what you're seeing. Yeah, so I highly recommend it's a really unique website to go to, because it's like you're clicking through, and you kind of feel like a voyeur after a while, because you really do feel like you get to know this guy. And that's what I'm so drawn to this. I will caution though, do not go to the year 1997 unless you're in a really good place with yourself. Because the year he passes away, and there's a number of images that are just heart-wrenching, but beautiful, because it is the testament to someone's life. So I said I would talk about inspiration, and I've been babbling on about how I get inspired, and different things about what I really like to look at when I'm kind of feeling a little bit lost. So the whole premise was, why did I start Defend the Darkroom? So 2 years ago, when I was really questioning my own printing practice and my photography, and I felt really like I was staring at a brick wall and I couldn't see any way around it, I decided to start asking people, like, well, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do? Because I thought somewhere something is going to make sense and stick. And I just wanted to also learn something and try something different, because maybe something different would help. So started to just ask different photographers and different people who were well known in the industry what they did. And these are people who have seriously dedicated their lives to photography. And what I found really, really unique is everything that I've touched on previously, they've all, in some way, shape, or form, have done. They have never stayed stuck in just looking at, I always take a photograph of this, I always do this. No, they were all looking for the next thing. They all looked. That was the one thing that I thought was really interesting, is they were all looking, even if it was at things that they didn't necessarily like, or would add, or at the time they thought would add to their practice. They were looking. They were all also like really not only looking outward, but also looking inward. They're super introspective, and they're not willing to just kind of, that they're not willing to stop halfway, even if they think, this isn't, no, they keep going, they push through that. So yeah, it's that whole, they just keep their juices going. And why don't I talk about people, like, why don't I talk to these people about how they take a photograph? And I'm kind of the belief that, at least in photography, we're the one kind of creative realm that we get really tied up in our tools and our gadgets and our gizmos and our this is who's it's and what's it's. And we don't talk about, like, well, why do something different? Like, if we go back to Antonio Martinez, he had 16 rolls of film. He could have just easily, I'm sure, printed out a whole lot of very nice circus photographs, but instead he chose to push it one step further, do something just that little bit different. And so that's what I think, that's why I chose not to talk about how to take a photograph, and instead why you take a photograph. It's to look deeper. It's to look, it's to show someone something new. And yeah, and essentially have a lot of fun. So I hope everyone is having fun. So just kind of in closing, I would love, because I started with this as to who you're looking at to get inspired, and are you looking at other people? So to hopefully help everyone else get inspired one last time, on the count of 3, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and go back to this. I would love everyone on the count of 3 to add one kind of thing about what you your one thing that you're photographing right now that you're completely taken up with. Okay, so share it, and it's like your one secret pleasure of things that you always take a photograph of and will never, like, you may just post it to Instagram, but you're obsessed with taking photographs of it. You don't know where it's going. So ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we've got a couple things here. Extreme macro photos of plants. I love it. Tree bark. Cool. So like such a great time of year to take pictures of tree bark. Okay, so I'm completely obsessed with taking pictures of my dog. Anyone who goes onto my Instagram will know that. Urban architecture, line, shadow, shapes. Nice. Awesome. Okay, so with that being said, I have blathered on about inspiration and would like really love to open it up. Unmute yourself and ask me a question about like inspiration or what I've learned from a couple of the people that I've talked to with through Defend the Darkroom. Go for it, Chilio.
All right. So I would like to invite you, if you have at the bottom of your Zoom window a reactions button, please feel free to use it. And you can use the raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question, especially when things get a little confusing. We can see you and we can make sure that you get the floor. So with that, I want to give a big round of applause to Paulette for a wonderful presentation and to accept her invitation to ask questions. And well, I'm gonna take the floor and I'm gonna say it's fantastic. And it is such hard work to finish a series of anything that you start. I mean, we can all start a project, right? And we all get excited and we all get hyper, etc. But at some point, we forget that it's been 3 years since we took our last picture for that project.
Yeah.
How do you motivate or with the conversations you've had, how do these artists keep themselves motivated?
A lot of different ways. Coffee comes into it. I'll use the example of the one photographer that I talked to, Deborah Samuel. So she did she's done some really epic bodies of work. Not only has she worked with some really amazing bands as well as industry people, being a commercial photographer for years. For those of you who are into Canadian music, she did a lot of Rush covers. She did most of the Rush covers, and it has won several awards for those. So she did this really interesting project where she scanned bones at the Royal Ontario Museum for months and months and months, and didn't know what she was doing with them until she actually had the passing of a farm, an animal that she was really attached to, and realized that she was actually processing that, because as there were for quite a while she couldn't look at those images, and all of a sudden she realized it was when she went back to it, she almost went and put it to bed and then went back to it a year or two later and was like, oh my gosh, because it was almost like she was trying to get inside of animals to figure out where they were going. And that's how she put it. And it was really beautiful. And, like, or someone like Ruth Kaplan, who, if you take a look at her Bather series, she went to over 50 different bathhouses throughout North America and Europe. And she didn't know, she was just interested in these people. And then one day she just, all of a sudden, she said it became routine for her and it was done. And so she moved on.
Huh.
And I think it's like one of those things where with both ideas, it's like you have to like listen to like the internal, like your internal soul with it. But at the same point in time, you also just have to be okay with, like, that movement through, like, ebbing and flowing with things. You can't just go, oh, things aren't linear necessarily. Sometimes things are squiggly.
Excellent. Thank you.
Did I even answer your question? I feel like it was.
No, I mean, it's different for different people. And I think it is always exciting to start a new project, but we seldom see it, to its natural conclusion, right? There's always something else that comes in that is more exciting. It reminds me of that meme, on the internet. But thank you. I do have a couple of questions from the floor. Okay. And the first question is, love seeing the examples of artists that inspired you. What was the name of the artist who did the 810 types?
Antonio Martinez. And if you look him up on Vimeo, he also has a website, but there's also like a soccer player and I think a football player that have the same name. So you actually have to say Antonio Martinez photography. But yeah, and if you look it up, he comes up on Vimeo.
All right, we have another question. And this one is about the recording of the presentation, if it will be recorded.
It is being recorded. And if you want a copy of it, ask Chelio, because I am completely okay with it going out into the great wide world. I feel like I would be like kind of a hypocrite if I put out a podcast regularly and then refuse to let this go out to the world.
Great. All right. So let's open up the floor.
Now, does anyone want to share, like, what I would love to hear about is in the things, like, I tried to find some really unique examples of people who inspire me and artists who, and trying to talk a little bit about the artists who I've spoken with for the podcast. Is there anyone who has an artist that, while I was showing examples, made them kind of think of an idea of someone who might be of an inspiration of the same line, someone who's unique and interesting for them?
Just a recent example, I posted a link in the chat. I came across a music video made from cyanotype still images where I used 5,000 cyanotype still images to construct his music video. And the link is there in the chat. And if you love the tintype, you'll really appreciate what they did with that particular creation too.
Oh, well, I can play a second or two.
Yeah,
I have it up here.
Yeah. Now, who is the artist, Ian?
I'd have to read it in the thing again, but it just caught my attention. And I used to I did cyanotypes a couple of decades ago on material, and it kind of inspires me to think, oh, I should maybe try that again.
Oh, so I'm going to play a couple of minutes, just a handful of seconds here.
Psycho, don't be afraid. You've got money to make. Psycho, don't be afraid. 'Cause it's never too late, too late. Tiptoeing round in space.
That was pretty wild. You could really see the texture on the paper.
Mhm.
Wow, thank you, Ian, for sharing that.
I would
I'll
love
put
to
the link.
know.
Oh, I'll repeat the link. I see that you put, I mean, of course, I clicked on the link you posted. I'll repeat it now. So anyone who wants to bookmark it may do so. That's fantastic, Ian. Thank you.
Yeah, it is kind of neat, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, wasn't there a film recently about Vincent van Gogh that was, it was not filmed. It was actually made up of paintings in his style, and
Oh, wow.
thousands of oil paintings that different artists from around the world made, and they're all, they were all photographed. And so it's an animated film, but instead of, acetate cells, it's actually each one of those frames is a painting, an oil painting. I mean,
That's amazing.
crazy.
I know when we were in art school, one thing is that there was, like, in the foundation year, we were recommended to, I wouldn't say copy, because that would be wrong, but we would be encouraged to try to use someone else's style. So to make our own painting, or drawing or whatever, using how someone else, like trying to make it look like someone else's. And it was really interesting because it kind of made you break out of the box that you would necessarily, like, if you'd always do something the way you've always done, you always get the same results, or however that is. I just found it really interesting because it really didn't keep, like, it really made you use your hand a different way, or it made you, like, put the paper a different way or something, especially if, like, someone's a lefty and you're a righty, all of a sudden it's like you're having to completely do something different to get the same effect. So now
It's always good, to get into somebody else's mind, to get into somebody else's way of doing things, right? Somebody else's boots.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So now, does everyone, like, here in this, does everyone shoot primarily film, and if so, like, if you're shooting film, are you trying to use your negatives in a different way? Like, are you trying to, maybe, or even if you shoot digital, are you trying to print those digital images differently? And how are you working with that? Yeah, Colleen, you and your little hole, you and your, actually, Colleen, would you speak to how you take photographs? Because how you do things is really inspirational and really unique.
Thanks. Yeah, so I tried out a Holga camera because our friend Sandra gave me an old one, and it takes 120 millimeter film, and it's easy to get at the camera store in Calgary, so that's excellent, the black and white. And I use it, basically I sort of challenged myself every single frame to do a double exposure. So I was, basically I take a double exposure for every single frame, and I don't have access to the darkroom right now. So right now I'm just, I send it out to get developed, and then I scan and I like digitally up the contrast and everything. But hopefully we'll get back in the darkroom soon. But yeah, go ahead.
Colleen is being needlessly humble as well. She won the Emerging Artists Award at this year's Exposure Festival in Calgary. So she also has garnered a lot of great support from a couple of really well-known photographers in Calgary, George Weber being one of them. And I highly recommend looking at her work if you're looking to see people using toy cameras and lomography in really unique ways.
I'll
Because
post it.
I do not know how Colleen makes her work. I'm really
I don't know how I
impressed.
do either. It's a really happy accident how some of these come together. I mean, I think it's just the composition from years and years of art college, right? I just have the composition in my head, and I just look at shapes and patterns and lines, and I go, okay, I think that would look great overlapped with that. And then when you do it in camera, you have no idea how it's going to turn out. So, yeah.
Well, and I think that
going
goes
with
back, and I think that goes back to what I was saying about the whole technical skill. It's like once you've got your technique and your technical skill down,
Yeah.
it's really amazing how then all of a sudden you get to break all the rules. And you don't have to do things the way you've always done them. You can start walking around, you can start, trying different things in different ways. So then that way, you can, look at how nature does things or something, or how someone did something 100 years ago, like Hannah Maynard, and go, okay, how do I do that now?
I have a question for the floor. Well, of course, Paulette, but also everyone present. During this past year and 70 odd days, where have you been inspired by the new way that in which we've been forced to live? Or has your inspiration been neutralized by the way in which we've been forced to live and interact?
Anyone?
Well, I gotta tell you, in my case, I've discovered that I love being home, and that I love doing my job from home, and it's a new freedom to always be comfortable in my space. I've come to the realization that I hate people. Yay! And I can admit it.
Jerry, Cliff, any of you guys, any new ways of shooting? So what do you mean, Ian, when you say that you're looking closer to home for inspiration? What does that mean?
Well, previously in my photographic adventures, it would always be, oh, I want to go over here. I want to, I'll go check out this place. I'll get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and catch sunrise over here. But you can't go over there now because it's restricted, right? You got to stay within your bubble or within your region. So, it was more or less, even looking in my own yard, closer at things. I always have an interest in macro, but I guess around the yard, overall it gets kind of boring. But at different times of the year, when you look closely at something and in the macro of it, there are more possibilities. And even on, a daily walk, or, just within the neighborhood, looking for those fine little nuances or something that's different, that's closer to home, rather than having to think, oh, I need to travel here to get a good picture, kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. You, Cliff, anything from you? Jerry?
Well, I've been doing macro photography on and off for years, and just doing a lot more of it.
Yeah.
I enjoy it. Especially like with plants and flowers and things like that. So I can go right in there and, take pictures of like the stamen and the pollen sitting there on the base of it. And, that it's what can I say? It's challenging and it's fun. I enjoy it.
So this, for myself, I typically hang out in the darkroom, and for whatever reason, I really didn't want to, I really got thrown off from printing, and I wasn't getting what I wanted. And so I actually started to bring a camera when I was walking the dog, and which is something I would typically never do. Like I'm very very motivated towards a specific shot. And I started to photograph the trees in High Park, which is what I never do because I'm not a landscape photographer. And yeah, all of a sudden now I have a body of work from these trees, like these specific trees that I walked by, that I've been walking by now every day for a year. And it's really interesting just to see how everything has moved and changed throughout a year. And never thought that that would be something that would interest me, but it's very interesting. So who knows, maybe I'm turning into a landscape photographer.
One of the things I did do is I started pulling out a couple of film cameras again, because I haven't photographed film for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Now I do have a couple of Lomo cameras as well, which are kind of fun. I've got one that's a 360-degree spinner.
Oh,
wow.
fun.
So if you hold it up, and it takes regular 35mm film, and I think you get about 8 exposures per spin. And what you can hold it up, you have to kind of hold it up unless you want yourself in there, and then you just pull the string and the thing spins around 180 degrees, and you don't know what you're going to get.
Like, is it film or is it digital?
It's film.
Oh, fun.
I'll see if I can dig it out.
Is it a 180 or is it a 360?
It's a 360.
360. That's
Yeah, I have a 180 too, but the 360 is that one's fun.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, let's see if I can dig it out.
Colleen, that Holga of yours, is it a typical Holga with all sorts of fascinating light leaks?
Yes, let me just hang on. I'll go grab it for you. I hold it together with a blue elastic band.
There you go.
Yes.
Ooh,
Beautiful.
technical.
Hang on.
See, that's technical knowledge that you need to have.
It has to be blue.
It must be blue. Red, no good.
Right. I believe I have one right here, just in case anybody needs it. I have a blue elastic.
Excellent.
Ready to go.
Sometimes it's purple. So yeah, that's what I walk around with.
I've seen those. They're nice.
They're lovely.
Yeah.
I really liked the medium format, like the square composition. Because usually I'm always doing a portrait.
Mhm.
But I
Orientation,
love
yeah.
this because basically I can flip the image any way I want. And actually some of the pictures in the exhibition, that's not their original, like the original way that I meant for it to go, but it kind of went better with the series. So the organizer convinced me to flip some on the side, and I was like, okay, that works.
Do you ever flip the camera? So like if you're taking
Always.
a picture this way, like, say a building like this, and then flip it sideways or something?
Always, almost every single time. I never usually take 2 pictures exactly like this. I'm always one is this way and one is this way. Flipping it upside down is a little bit harder because you can't really register unless you're, really careful.
Awesome. So Jerry, did you find that camera?
Here, meet the spinner.
Oh,
Can
yeah.
everybody see that?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so if you can see at the back, there's a little string that you pull. So
Okay.
here's what happens.
Goes off like a grenade. Oh.
Oh, wild.
Do it again, do it again, do it
That's
again.
super fast.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's fun. So you get about 8 shots per 36 exposure roll. And also it goes right outside, goes from one end of the film, from top to bottom of the film. So you're getting the sprocket holes in there too.
Oh, neat.
Wow.
So
That's very cool.
I scan them when I have them. I've got a flatbed scanner, and I figured out a way to make it work for those. So
Yeah. Wow. That's really cool.
fun. Yeah. Yeah. I got a few of those little cameras, not this particular one, but Lomo used to be right around the corner from where I live before they closed up. So we're selling everything off half price at that point. So I just went in there and grabbed as many as I could. So I mean, I have one that does like 4 exposures per frame, and another one that does 4 exposures going horizontally, and different ones. They're fun though.
Not the world's best lenses, but
No.
not why you buy it.
That's right. No.
just like the Holga. Like the biggest complaint about a Holga is, oh no, my lens is too sharp.
I just leave it on one setting and go. Doesn't matter how far or close I am.
So now, does anyone get inspired by anything that has nothing to do with photography?
Collage.
Like, okay, so
Collage.
share with the group. The group's nosy.
Huh? Yeah, collage.
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 Oh, nice.
Because
Like, so do you mean like making, like collaging, like cutting out from magazines and stuff and collaging that way, or collaging in like with a camera?
both. My mind just sort of thinks in a collage kind of way. So yeah, I think because some of my previous artwork was mixed media collage.
Mhm.
So yeah, I guess that's what I'm sort of trying to continue on doing with the with my Holga pictures.
And Chelia, you said that you also get inspired by things that are non-photographic.
Yeah,
Like what?
music. And
Okay.
so I've actually picked up this little doody-ba-doo thingy. It's a synthesizer. And I don't play music. I'm not a musician by any stretch of the imagination, right? If there were music laws, I would be in prison for life. But it really just gets me thinking differently. It exercises part of my brain that I've no idea. I mean, I'm a college teacher, and I'm very focused on my classes and the materials and all that I put together for my students. But with this, I can completely get lost in just learning how to push 2 buttons, right? And getting them right or not right or whatever. And I disappear into my world, and it's fantastic. And it doesn't necessarily cross over to anything else. It's just another space where I can go and play that has nothing to do with anything else that I do for a living.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I used to do stained glass, which unfortunately I have not had an opportunity to do for a number of years, mainly because of lack of space. But it was really enjoyable. I made a number of lamps, and I made windows. And it's very mundane stuff. I mean, it's not, once you've cut out the glass, like selected your pattern, selected your colors, cut out the glass, it's like you're just kind of sitting there in front of the television, wrapping foil around the edges of the glass.
It's like knitting.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
Only way more potential of like losing blood because of that.
You know what I'm doing? I really would like this conversation to continue. So what I'm going to do is I am going to stop recording the conversation bit. And